Welcome back to another episode of Pre-Canon with the Pope. I'm Renzo, and so what do I look?
And I'm Monica.
Yes, we're your hosts. So this is what's hard. Okay.
You look so distressed right now.
I'm so frustrated because we recorded an entire episode and now it's not here. It recorded and I went to edit it and there was an issue with the audio and I didn't shave today and I'm not doing it. This is it.
This is the day after Seek look.
This is after a week of no shaving. No, I'm just frustrated because we have to re-record, not because we don't want to provide the content, but more because I thought the conversation we had was very good.
Yeah.
And it was authentic and it was genuine. And I never like to try to recreate it.
It feels forced.
Because you don't know what you're doing.
It's okay.
I was going to do it. That's what she said joke, but not too early. They don't know us yet. We have to take them out to dinner. But thank you for being here. We're going to bring the heat anyway. We're going to try to bring the heat anyway. This is, and I'm thinking like, what did we say that I have to say in the beginning last time? This is episode 99.
Yeah. For starters, this is episode 99.
You're trying to be energized.
I'm working on it. No, I'm actually really excited about this. I guess I'm energized because I was just posting about it on Instagram and getting people excited.
I was helping the kids go to bed, so I'm glad you got to do that.
That's
just kidding.
sassy. I was there with you.
But, just kidding. Those oh my goodness. Bedtime is also not energizing before podcasting.
No.
When Thomas is looking for the toothbrush and yelling. Oh no, he was yelling for the toothpaste and you're like, this, no, this, no. This, no, I mean my toothbrush. And then he's like, which one? The blue one. And I was like, the one that's next to you?
That you pulled out of the container.
Why?
And put it on the counter.
They're clones of their father. They are clones of their father.
I didn't say you did. But yeah, so this is episode 99. Our next episode is 100.
Sequential. Sorry. You go.
That's fine. That's all I had today. Actually, that was the only input I had.
No, I love you.
I have nothing else
I love and affirm you. You are beautifully, wonderfully lit. You are strong.
Apparently,
you are brave. You can do this.
Speaking of strong and brave, man, our daughter today at jiu-jitsu. Anyway, we talk too much about jiu-jitsu. But
never. That's impossible.
They did tournament style.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of kids signed up for a tournament this coming weekend. And so their professor did a tournament style class. And she's the only one not even old enough to go to this competition. So like she's not really supposed to be like a part of this. He separated them into like sub age groups and stuff like that. And that girl won because she got a little boy's back.
Yeah. She did twice. In both rounds.
Oh my goodness. She was a beast.
It
was so cool.
Yeah.
And she didn't even want to do class today because we had just come back from Seek. Guys, we were gone for 8 days with these kids. It was bananas. It was long. It was wonderful. It was exhausting. And then we had school today.
Yeah.
So this girl's wiped. I mean, if you've heard us talking about her.
And they do a co-op, if you don't know. So like they're homeschooled, but like 2 days a week. They're not. And
it's just not her favorite thing to do. Like
anything.
Yeah. So things out of the ordinary, she has a hard time adjusting to. And then going to school is one of her least favorite things to do. And so we're going to kind of give her a break and not make her do jiu-jitsu tonight. Because again, she's only 6. Like we push our kids, but we also realize that they're little. So we weren't pushing her, but we did pack the gi just in case she changed her mind. And like 7 minutes before class, she's like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. And got dressed. And anyway, she won the tournament in her age group.
She did great.
So good. Anyways, I digress. This is episode 99. The next one is 100. And I can't believe that we're here. Like 100. 100 episodes. We've done this 99 times so far.
Well, we've done more.
We've done more, actually.
And there's just been so many. No, not just that. There's other ones that we've done, and then they get ruined by the audio. But so an announcement, though. After episode 100, we're going to change the name of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to consolidate the brand and merge Pre-Cana with the Pope with To Become Family. So Pre-Cana with two popes is the new the new name. No, it's going
To
to be
become a pope.
no,
No.
too controversial. But no, we're going to call everything To Become Family. So anything
for those of you that just listen to our podcast and don't follow us on social media, that's like our social media handle and our website name and things like that. Yeah, and that's where we started. Pre-Cana with the Pope is like one of the fruits of that.
Initially, we started because I had 2 failed blogs and a failed Instagram page. I used to just do quotes and images.
What is failure in that world? It just is
when you stop going, you stop trying.
There you go. I guess failure. I don't like the word failure.
I've accepted it.
Okay. Keep going.
But no, so that and so now we are To Become Family. And we have an exciting announcement. Hopefully we can announce it next week at the live episode.
Yeah.
If you want to be part of the live episode. So
yeah. What is a live episode?
Secret. Not really sure what a live episode is because we're not going to do like a YouTube live. The software that we use has an option of inviting people to be part of the audience. So we could record while there's an audience here and then they could have a chat where they could communicate with us. So we're hoping we could do something with that. I'm still probably going to make it up on the spot.
We want to celebrate with you for episode 100 somehow.
Mm-hmm. Don't want to be alone.
That's our idea, is to invite you to come along, see what happens behind the scenes, kind of, sort of, how this goes, and also like ask us questions, make comments, and be a part of the episode.
Mm-hmm. So, but for today's episode, the title has not lied to you. We're not doing a clickbaity title. We are going to respond, reflect, react to an episode of the Catholic Gentleman's Podcast, where they talk about, the title of their podcast episode is called What Women Don't Understand About Men. What women don't understand about men. Mm-hmm. And the 3 hosts of the show start going through an aspect of masculinity that they think is largely misunderstood by women, which I tend to agree that this aspect is. We're not going to go through the whole episode. They might, second half of the episode, they might go into other aspects of masculinity that women don't understand. But for the first 20 minutes, they talk about the male sex drive, male libido. And they kind of try to uncover more and share more about the male experience with women. I guess maybe with women. I'm assuming that's who their intended audience is, even though they're podcasts.
Do women listen to that podcast?
I don't know who listens to ours. Hi, Mom. But so I wanted to react to it because there are some things that they said that I don't necessarily agree with, that you and I have commented before that I think a lot of people just believe. A lot of like middle school beliefs about how boys and men work, I think people might still think are true. Mm-hmm. So I just think it'd be interesting to talk about. So again, this is our trying to make it seem like we haven't talked about this already phase. We already did this whole thing and we're going to do it again.
Yeah. But maybe the conversation will be different.
Yeah, maybe. Never mind. Yes, it'll be different. I don't want to just make self-deprecating or Monica-deprecating jokes, so I was just going to leave it alone.
Okay.
I was going to be like, yeah, maybe we'll do that a second time. But like, I didn't want you to take that too seriously because you did great.
I appreciate it.
I think you're great.
Okay, I'm ready.
Are you? Is there anything else you want to say about that before we go to the video?
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting what I say this time around because
Do you remember what you said the first time?
No, not really. I don't actually. It's really funny. Maybe funny. I don't know if funny is the right word, but like sometimes
who funny? Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes
don't pitch me. Stop. People can hear this.
Listen. Hear what?
Do you know when
they can hear me pinching your stomach?
When my stomach, that was not stuff. When we were at Target, I was getting my flu shot. The kids were so bored, and I had John Paul, Gianna, and I think Ben.
That was a good combo.
And they were sitting, and they were just starting to chant. Like they were so bored because like the pharmacy's taking forever. We're waiting in line. Like Target's very bright and white and like sterile, so like there's nothing to look at, and they're just ho ho, he he, ha ha, hoo hoo, ho ho, and they just kept going over and over, and they just like the little bit softer now shout, like that song, whatever, like the shout song, like they just slowly started getting louder and louder to the point they started yelling, and I was like, guys, this is embarrassing.
Because you probably joined in a few of those choruses.
So that's what made me think of when I just did the laugh thing.
Okay, well, it's your fault for putting a camera here, because usually I'm on the other side of the table looking at you, so I can't reach you when you bother me.
I liked it. Okay. What were you saying? I embarrassed you.
Oh, so yesterday when we recorded this for the first time, it was the first time I had ever like seen this episode or listened to this episode of The Catholic Gentleman. You had talked about it quite a bit in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, because you're very excited to record this episode because you have things to say. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm interested to see how my reaction is, because yesterday's was very like, it was unfiltered.
I think you should just, well, was it? I feel like you like held back a little. I think you should just go for it.
I process slower than you do.
This is not getting cut out. She's bored.
No, it's late.
All right.
Tired. It's a long day. Guys, right. I'm here. I'm ready.
We're going to jump into the first part. This is not getting edited either.
I know.
There's no time.
There's no time.
There's time.
We released
but
this
she did.
tomorrow.
No time. Another Office reference. All right. So we're going to start on 5 minutes in. 5 minutes, 40 seconds in. And we're going to hear a little bit about what they say, and then we're going to talk about it ourselves.
Women in our lives. And so the first one that we want to talk about is the obvious one that comes up frequently, and that is why men want to have sex all the time. And if you listen to our Battling Lust and Sexual Attraction, you'll get a lot of this. But I do think it is something that we men need to understand that women just will not understand. They are not biologically wired like we are. Men, we are biologically wired to procreate, right? It is something like the animals where they're looking for the most amount of opportunities. But unlike the animals, we have the ability of self-control. We have the ability in the virtue of chastity in our relationship with God and sanctifying grace and all that is good and holy for our relationship with others. But we are still biologically wired like that. At the same time, we have testosterone, which can help us, in our strength. It can help us in our life as men, but it also pushes us in that sexual, as we say, that I guess crassly, that sex drive. And so this can be something that I know is also really hard for women to understand and hear, even because very often they're incognizant of this reality. And that's not to say that women don't have this, that they don't experience this, but not to the degree that we do. There's a Ohio State 2019-2018 study that came out where they were just they were researching college men. And at minimum, the lowest was they thought about sex 19 times a day. That was at the lowest. And at the maximum, it was, something like every 7 minutes if you do the math throughout a waking period of your day. And so this is quite literally, even statistically, how often we men are thinking about this. And this can create tension in our relationships with those closest to us, because we're.
So, yeah. I would definitely say that there's tension in marriages related to this.
Sure. Yeah.
If there's not like a shared vision of how this should be navigated. Do you want to go first?
No, I'd like to
go
first.
So a couple of things. I probably should have prefaced this earlier, but nothing against the guys that are doing the podcast. I was making faces earlier. I'm just trying to keep myself awake, people. That was not related to them. That was more related to me and my lack of dopamine in my brain. It's there now, as you can see my more animated self. But first, the study that he points out, the Ohio State study, I can't just take, whenever people cite studies, I don't think it's wrong to cite studies. I tend to do that too, but I think it's important to go back to the study. A couple of things to keep in mind is like how was the data collected? And then like, what is the conclusion of the researchers for the data? And then we could also interpret the data on our own. Like we don't necessarily have to go by what the researchers say. But it's a survey study. So it's not like they had a researcher following all of the sample size students and asking them every second, like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Because like that would be more accurate, right? If I'm still, because that's what I do with you. Like,
not
you're sitting there quietly.
self-reporting.
What are you thinking? Right? No. So instead, like they self-reported. So like the people in the study are saying how often, like they're keeping a tally of how often they're thinking of specific things, and not even the whole sample size wasn't all asked about sex. Like they were broken up into groups so that some of the groups were asked to think about or to tally how often they thought about sex. Other groups were asked about how often they were sleeping, like they thought about sleeping, thought about eating, thought about other things. And then that data was put together, and then the researchers are then concluding like, all right, if this is how often men are thinking about sex and women are thinking about sex, like what does this data, what can we infer from the data? And I don't think the researchers themselves did not come up with a conclusion alone that like, oh, men think about sex more than women, which was true. But they said that a better indicator of, if you look at the study, a better indicator of who thinks about sex more is related to their emotional, what was the word?
Erodophilia.
The words erodophilia, like they gave them an erodophilia score, but like their emotional feelings, or their feelings towards sexuality. So for example, if the people they're surveying had an erodophilia score, or like if they had more comfortable feelings in talking about their sexuality, they're more likely to be thinking about sex more often. So like if they were more comfortable within their sexuality, or more secure in their sexuality, they were more likely to be thinking about sex more often. If they self-reported comfort within their sexuality. And so that being a bigger indicator to me does not necessarily, like, to me that shows that like the men that are thinking more about sex are the ones that are more comfortable, quote unquote, comfortable in their sexuality, which could also be interpreted as like they're just used to talking about it more often, have been exposed to things more often, maybe more experienced. So because they have all those experiences, and because they're so comfortable talking about things, and because they've been exposed to things in a young age, therefore they're thinking about sex more often. So then I would further infer from that like, then this is not an indicator of normal, healthy sexual understanding of what a male should be like, but instead it's just an indication of like, this is how disordered sexual desires can manifest in college age students.
Yeah.
That's how I would interpret that. I would not interpret that, because like you're thinking about the college age men in Ohio State, 2024. So 2019 study. Oh, we're old. 5 years ago, like how many of them had phones? How many of them have looked at porn or been exposed to porn? How many have had any sexual interactions up to that point in their lives? So like that skews the sample, and those are confounding variables of, it's not just a healthy sexual, like it's not healthy male sexuality. So to say that like, oh, men just think about sex more because like, look, the study says men think about sex more. Like, no, maybe men are thinking about sex more because they're predisposed. Like you could say like, yeah, with testosterone biologically, they might be predisposed to thinking about sex more often. But I believe that, so like maybe like there's a difference between men and women in that sense. I don't know what the number is, but it could be as little as like women think about it once, men think about it 3 times. But to say you think about it 19 times a day and like they consider that normal, like that to me is like,
and
no,
that was on the low end.
And that was on the low end of it. Like, no, that's not okay. And I think to say that like, oh, well, it just shows, like, I just think it shows how susceptible men are to having their sexuality exploited by the way, by phones and by different means that the devil gets in to get men to have a disordered sexuality.
I think that you tiptoed on this idea too, but I wanted to extend the idea like that they also were surveying college guys.
Yes.
And I feel like in that season of life, like college men, yes, are thinking about sex more often because they're in that season of life where they're like considering whether they're looking for a mate or not. And then you said like hookup culture can distort that. I think that in that arena of college, like the social standards are different than when you're out of college. So you're evaluating one another and whether or not like you're judging each other's attractiveness and things like that. And people are talking about their hookup culture. Like they're talking about their hookups so it's just like,
so the culture itself is overly sexualized
is hypersexualized. Like in college, like that's one of the main things that I think is happening. It's like
Right.
going to class. Who's thinking about who, and then like where are we gonna drink? Like I think that's like the order of
that's what they're thinking about in class.
like of their thinking. And so I think that it's an unfair. I think for them to use this study to like be like, it's okay that I think about sex more than my wife because Ohio State guys say that it's okay.
Interesting.
Is a poor choice of a study,
right,
to help make their point.
Because ultimately the point that they're trying to make is that there's tension in marriages because men naturally think about sex more than women. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, again, anecdotally, I think most men would agree. It's not always the case, but most men would agree. But I think, to me, a big sticking point is like, at what rate is the difference? Because I think there are men who are thinking about it 19 times a day or every 7 minutes in their marriage, and like that's a problem. But they may not acknowledge it's a problem because they feel like, well, biologically I'm wired this way, so therefore it's okay. Right. And then we throw the word testosterone around to be like, oh, it's because of the testosterone we have. And one of the big things I have an issue with is that like Andrew Huberman has done a great job, like going into him and Derek from More Plates, More Dates has gone into like just the difference with male hormones and how the different, like the levels of hormones that men have affects their behavior and things they do. Huberman talks about how testosterone is the hormone that helps effort feel good. So like doing hard things raises your testosterone, and your testosterone going up makes you want to do more hard things. But men never use that. Like, so you could have men who are like, oh, my testosterone's so high, I want to have sex all the time. I look at porn, I masturbate, blah, blah, blah. But then they don't have lives where they challenge themselves at all. So like, that's not, so like,
it's not congruent.
It's not one or the other. Like your testosterone, both happen. So like you could, and not saying that those men are virtuous, the ones that do hard things and also think about sex, but like, it's a both and, it's not an either or. So
you can't use that argument for one piece.
No, and then go sit on the couch. You can't. So that's just, I don't like the study, and I don't like the idea that just like, it's just our biology. I think that premise leads to a lot of dangerous conclusions later on. And I don't think they mean to do that. I think they're just trying to be like, well, look, it's different. But I'm like, no.
You have to be careful of like, who's hearing this information.
Because you're giving people outs. I think you're giving men outs by laying that foundation as like, it's because of your biology. It's not really your fault. You can't control it.
I keep thinking of Zootopia when you say it's just biology that way.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, where it's like the predators must be the aggressive ones, but really it's like the lamb mayor who's like,
like always the lamb
shooting the lamb mayor. She's like shooting them with something that makes them go crazy. Anyways, watch Zootopia if you're a parent or not to get that reference.
We're going to jump ahead now to a little later down in the episode, about 3 minutes past what we were just at. And they're going to talk about and expand more on this idea that men desire sex differently from women.
Yeah, I think that study at Ohio State is really enlightening, because it just shows the fundamental difference between men and women. A friend of mine, he was on the road for 2 weeks trying to get jobs. He was interviewing all over the nation, flying everywhere. He didn't actually go home. And all he could think about was getting back home and having intercourse with his wife, you know. And when he arrived home and he made that advance towards his wife was like so stressed out, kids, whatever, everything, so stressed out. She rejected him. And a fight ensued. They began a huge argument. And he says, all I've been thinking about is you and intimacy with you for the last 2 weeks. And she goes, I haven't thought about that for the last 2 weeks.
I want to expand on that. Like, I want to let him keep going, but what do you think of that?
It makes me have a feeling in my throat. Like,
tell me more.
That comment of like, all he could think about in the 2 weeks that he's job interviewing is that he wants to go home and have intercourse with his wife. Like, the fact that that's a statement he said out loud to his wife and his friend, and was like, why are we fighting? is like, how about you focus on your job interviews? And then you might have a better time.
What?
I just don't. I
Well, what's wrong with the comment?
I just think that like
For the male who doesn't understand the difference.
that
I do understand it. Sorry, listeners. I'm playing devil's advocate.
like to sit there and say that all I've been thinking about while I'm away is having sex with my wife is just, it just sounds so selfish and self-serving when
Not romantic?
no.
What
Because-
if I was Ryan Gosling? Sorry. Sorry. Keep going.
Because maybe. Because he didn't say all I could think about was getting home to be with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
What he said was all I could think about was getting back and having intercourse with my wife. And to me, I'm thinking like, okay, if my husband is away for 2 weeks on job interviews,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trusting that he's putting this like full effort into this job search to put his best foot forward and to like represent himself in a way that he could like help provide for our family. Like if it's causing you to travel, you must like really need
Yeah.
to be getting a job.
Yeah.
And you're like, we're willing to go anywhere because we need a job or whatever. And I'm at home doing whatever I'm doing at home. It sounds like this guy has kids, like taking care of the kids without this extra help, without my husband around. So I'm trusting that he's doing his due diligence.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do my due diligence so that as a team, we can get this done. Right. And then to think that he is thinking about having sex with me is like, I don't feel like that doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I think inadvertently what happens is that you end up separating sex from the person.
Yes.
Because the person is doing all of these things. So if sex were to take place on your, when you do your I Love Lucy, honey, I'm home, or Lucy, I'm home, like you come in and the first thing should be helping around the house, helping to take that mental load off, then catching up on like how the job interview is going or the job search is going, and just like updating everything, making sure that everything is back squared away. And then at some point, and it may not even be that day, but like some point down the line, then making advances. But the advances shouldn't be like can we have sex now? Right? It should be like a thing that comes from like, we get to be together again. We've caught up on this whole, everything we're doing. Our paths have been separate, our journeys together as family. And like now we're back together again. And because of that being so good, that's how you're entering into marital intimacy. And I don't think that's how it's being portrayed here. It sounds like the person came home and is making advances because they have missed having sex for the last 2 weeks.
And also to me, though, it sounds like he was distracted by the fact that he wasn't having sex. That all he could think about. And to me, I'm just like, you had other things you should have been thinking about.
True.
So like, and I mean, I know that I know that's not every single thought that he had, but like
19 times a day.
If they're piggybacking this off of like how frequently you think about sex, and then to me, I'm just like, that's disordered in this 2 week span. Your focus should not have been having sex with your wife. It should have been like the needs of the whole family and the marriage. And at that time, sex wasn't the top of the list.
Now, what if the husband pushes back now and is like, well, no, I just missed my wife a lot? Because I think what happens, and I forgot, Joe Ehrman talks about this. I don't remember the name of the term, but that a lot of men struggle with verbalizing their emotions. So like most men, the only emotion that they could exhibit like openly and on command is anger. Like they know what anger looks like. They know how anger feels like. They can express anger and not be ashamed of it, but like other emotions they may not be able to voice. So like, I think I would argue that the husbands, and most husbands, are just, they can't differentiate between I miss my wife, I want to be close to my wife, I like the security and the love that I get from her, from I want to have sex with my wife. And they think both are the same and interchangeable. So me saying I want sex, that's what I mean though. I want all this other stuff.
But I guess to me, what I hear when it's presented in this like scenario, is that like, wow, that was stressful and I need a release. I need an outlet. And like, you make me feel better when I'm stressed. And like, I feel a little bit used in that scenario. Like that, like, it doesn't seem like it's me, but really just like what I can do for you. And like, and I think that maybe it's a miscommunication on the man's part, and like, and these wires are getting crossed in how he's presenting, how she's receiving this information. So maybe this is helpful for guys, husbands and wives right now who are miscommunicating, and the husband's really trying to say something, but maybe this is what the wife is hearing. Yeah. But like, to me,
though he's not saying the right thing. So what you're hearing is accurate.
Okay. But like, to me, it's like, okay, just because you're putting sex in the marital context doesn't, like, just because those boxes are checked doesn't mean that it's rightly ordered, loving sexual intimacy. It still kind of sounds disordered and like a release for your stress, which to me is like similar to like porn and masturbation. If that's if that's what you use for.
And I know that, so this is something Matt Fradd talked about on his old podcast, Love People Use Things, that some men use pornography as a pacifier. Like our kids never took pacifiers. Ben sucks his thumb. Yeah. So like whenever he's distressed, things are hard, I yelled at him for something, he sucks his thumb. Yeah. Like when he didn't want to put a shirt on today in jiu-jitsu. So whenever he's distressed, he sucks his thumb. So a lot of and what people do, so similar to what the kids do in using pacifiers in their babies, a lot of men will, and men or women, but mostly men will use pornography as a way to soothe themselves. So they're self-soothing so whenever they're anxious, whenever they're scared, whenever they're frustrated, whenever excited, they're bored. Like there's just like even excited for good things and bad things, like just all things. They'll use porn as a pacifier. And I think a lot of good Catholic men who don't want to look at porn anymore then transfer that over to their wives. So whenever they're stressed, and I remember we had discussions when I was able to differentiate this better in our marriage. And I would actually, I remember these discussions now we didn't talk about this yesterday. But I remember having times where I'm like, you know what? I want to, and we're not going to have sex tonight. And I'd say no, because I really only want to because I was stressed today. So I don't want to do that. Because I wanted to, because I know I hurt our relationship. I hurt our marriage. I wounded you because of the times that happened. So then like, I wanted to no longer do that. Yeah.
Because there's definitely like a transference. Yeah. In your journey of overcoming addiction and healing from addiction, that like, okay, come married time, like, okay, then now like sex is on the table and that's available. And those habits, like those feelings of unrest, like would come in and you would desire to have sex because that felt good. Pacifier. It made you feel better. And so it wasn't like bad intention, like in the forefront, but like really if you got deeper and more like looked at the root of why you were asking for sex at those times, it wasn't 100% to be with me. Right. And to like renew our marital vows and things like that. But it was more.
But even just leaving it at that, it wasn't to be with you. It was to self-soothe the things that I couldn't cope with. I didn't know how to handle that. Even I couldn't handle at that time. I needed to wait until a different day. And soothing that way isn't fair to you because it is, like you said, it is using you. So like I'm on a 2-week business trip and I'm super stressed. And like if the only thing I'm thinking about is sex for 19 times a day while I'm awake, and then all I can get to when I see my wife is like, oh, I can't wait till the kids go to bed so we can have sex. Like you're using your wife to self-soothe. And like, that's not okay. Because then what also happens is like, those are the marriages that when the wife has to abstain, when a couple has to abstain because the wife just had a baby, like those are the ones that's what the wives are posting in groups like, oh, my husband looked at porn because we can't have sex or because I don't feel ready to have a baby, whatever. And like, that's not rightly ordered. Right. And I think that's important to point out like this again. And I think that comes from setting the base of like, well, men think about sex all the time. So therefore this is normal. Like, no, it's not normal. Because like since we don't do that to self-soothe anymore, like that doesn't happen. anymore. So like it's you have, and like they mentioned
And
earlier,
that doesn't
like
make you less manly. It's not that you're disinterested in sex.
I am no. Oh, not. I wasn't going to talk about that.
Okay.
Oh, I could absolutely choke Renzo from 5 years ago out super quickly.
Yes.
So like that's all that matters.
Okay.
Jiu-jitsu. No, but
testosterone.
I don't need any of it. I just need dainty feet. Sorry. You would only know if you did it. So you don't. So it's okay. Like you put the feet on the hips. Okay. What I was gonna say though, no, now I totally lost it.
I'm sorry.
What was I saying? Don't rub my back in solace.
But you'd be interested if the opportunity arose.
I'm a man. My voice isn't deep. This is all the facial hair I get. All right, let's see what else. I totally lost my thoughts. So let's see if this like wraps up better. I don't know.
But that's kind of that difference, you know, especially sometimes with married women who are under a lot of stress with a lot of children. But here's what I think is really fundamental about this. If we get into the biology and instinctive nature, the way that God has created and hardwired men and women, and I want to just make a caveat here, a qualifier, is that this is sacred ground. And so we're going to use terms that may not sound sacred, but we're trying to achieve the sacred. Okay. So if we're coming off as irreverent, that is not the goal here at all. We want to reverently approach.
I think I come off as irreverent for some things, especially this episode. Sorry, that wasn't my goal either. Continue.
This topic with respect for both sexes, but we want to also unveil what's underneath the hood so that men can help to understand themselves better. They can, right, and then women, they can
move up. I can't. Let's move up 10 seconds.
In them, and that being in them from point zero on has a relationship with its mom. And so the mom relates to that baby through her breast and through the womb and all of that. So it's purely biological in that sense, but the biology tells us something. A woman just naturally, instinctively understands what it means to give. But men, and this is very important, men are very disconnected from this. Men do not have that built in to know what it means to give, except other than planting their seed and deriving some kind of pleasure about it. And it's almost 100%. You know, men derive pleasure almost 100% of the time in sexual intercourse in that way. So men are kind of disconnected in a way from that instinctive nature towards self-gift. So sexual intimacy, and this is why I think God created us, one of the reasons, besides procreation, God created us men with this way so we could learn how to become more giving. We could learn self-gift. So sexual intimacy becomes the training ground for men to learn this, because when we think about intercourse and sexual intimacy so much, that gives us opportunities to learn how to exercise our body, our will, our whatever it is, our virtue, everything for the sake of learning how to be a gift in this. And I would like to get to that in a minute.
What do you think, besides our heater being super loud?
Yeah. So I was almost like, I feel like one point that he made was that, like, I think that with TOB, that actually that's the point of why men were created that way, to be gift, right? To be like the deliverer, to be the giver in that situation, for women to receive. And then because of sin, that's become disordered. So instead of learning, I think it's an act of relearning and reordering that idea of gift through sexuality. Instead of like learning it because it's not instinctual, I think that it's like a relearning and reordering of it. And it, like, I would agree that, like, I mean, in anything of virtue, so we're talking about chastity, that it's practicing. But I think that you have to be really careful still, again, because they started the episode with this idea.
And they keep going back to it, the idea that men.
That I think that, like, yes, in your marriage, like, you're practicing virtue and you're working on that together, but like, your wife is not a, like,
there's a difference between,
like, I can't think of the word.
Like, there's a big difference. I don't know. And this is more, I think, more nuanced. Hope I'm using that word correctly, but like, there's a big difference between the human virtue and perfected human virtue. I'm trying to think. I know this is in the Summa. I haven't read it recently, but like, so like you and I could be courageous, but then there's like also a level of courage that we can't achieve outside of not. So like, oh, sorry, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. I hope it makes sense. So like all good that we do is by grace alone. Like we can't do good things without grace. Everything good that we do is a cooperation with God's grace in us. And that's how we do good things. But there's things that like we could, even with that, like there's things that there's certain levels of virtue we could achieve on our own. And then there's also perfected virtue that we can't achieve on our own. Like that's only it's only through God's grace. I don't know what kind of grace. I don't remember if it's sanctifying grace or what that achieves that for us. But like, so like, for example, when we talk about like a person is exercising the virtue of chastity, which they addressed earlier, this is what I actually was going to mention earlier. So in the beginning of the episode, they talk about chastity and like, oh, well, men can desire to have sex all the time, but we also have chastity and self-control. Like you could have chastity and self-control, but it not be the Christian perfection of that virtue. Mm-hmm. So like you could have chastity in that, like, okay, I desire to have sex. I want to have sex, but I know it's not rightly ordered at this time. So we're not going to do it. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's chastity. But there's also like a deeper chastity, I think it's temperance. I think it all falls under temperance, mm-hmm. correct? Right. But like where like, it's not just and this goes like into the whole redemption thing. And this is why like, I really like atonement theology. But like the whole idea that like there's a transformation that can happen within you where like now the disordered desires that you have from concupiscence like are now put back into order, mm-hmm. so that the chastity that you're living out is that you could see everything as it should be. And that you're not thinking about sex as 19 times a day, but maybe every time that sex comes up, like your thoughts are immediately drawn to how much you love your wife or how beloved she is, or like every 19 times you think about sex is like a reminder of like how you're supposed to die to yourself and live for others. Something like that, where like and then eventually it becomes like, oh, now I'm only thinking about it 17 times and now every thought isn't about sex anymore. It's about only these holy things. Like there's a transformation that should happen. It's not that it kills your sexual desire, but like I think that's kind of what he's getting to, is that like men are supposed to be trained to be self-gift through this desire for sex. But like, I don't think that can be done on its own. Like, I don't think you could train a man and anybody who has disordered desires to fix their disordered desires by the reminder of like, oh, you make sure you use this for the right thing. Like, I think that's only done by grace. Mm-hmm. Like, I think you could have self-control and self-possession, yes, and self-mastery to an extent. But I think, like the Catechism says, it's long, exacting work with many falls. Like, it's not something that just happens. Yes. Like, self-mastery doesn't just come about, and it doesn't come about by our own power. So,
but also like that transformation of thought and that transformation of will, like, because you have your like thought and your desire, right? And then like through this practice of chastity, you can have those thoughts and desires and still act differently from them, right? Yep. You can still act rightly ordered. But then through this other grace and through like cooperation with God in those situations, then there's this opportunity for those thoughts to actually be transformed. And the way that those thoughts come about can be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, and I don't know. And because like, I don't want to just go by like my own experience. So like, that's not the be all end all. Because I feel like a person can have an initial sexual thought and let's say it usually comes in at a 10 to people, and then like to a guy, and then he has to work out like, all right, what do I do with this? Like eventually it could come in at lower numbers, and it can come like and not be as intense, so that they can kind of direct it more easily. Mm-hmm. And I do think eventually it can come in as like, it doesn't even come in at a 1. It doesn't even register at a 1, but they could, like, I know for myself, but like in the past that would have been a 10, mm-hmm. but like it doesn't even register anymore. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like there's that kind of, I've experienced that kind of restoration, mm-hmm. in that like, this is how I ought to have experienced. And even then I know that I don't experience it the same as I will in heaven. Mm-hmm. Right. So like chastity exists in heaven. Mm-hmm. The ability to sin exists in heaven. There's just no desire to sin, but like, you're still free to. Sorry, that's a whole.
That's a different episode.
But like, does that make sense in what he's saying though? Like that you can't just say like your husband 17 times a day is a healthy thing. Like it's still not just because you think it's gonna like I'm gonna train my husband to do that. Like you're not gonna do that. He needs to go get help because he shouldn't be thinking about sex that much. So like spiritual direction and therapy should be what he's seeking, not just like, oh, I guess this is just normal for men.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Moving on to, I'm gonna go here.
Helps him to relate, or the way he thinks in a pinnacle way, he thinks is how he's going to relate to a woman. So this is a big deal to a young boy when he's coming into this. So I would just like to stop there. That's where I think the fundamental kind of foundation here is the biology and the instinctive nature of why. And literally, and this is another point, it is almost automatic at an early age when it's activated, and it comes at the most inopportune times. Okay. I mean, and I could tell stories about, but it happens at the most inopportune times. And women do not understand that for a man, we literally feel from the time we go through puberty on, we literally feel sexual desire in our brain and in our loins, and it can be activated like that.
Yeah.
Whereas a woman, it is not like that. And so it's very difficult for her to understand why is he all of a sudden turned on? You know, why all of a sudden is he sexually aroused? I don't understand that. It's because there's a bit of an automatic, it can be a bit of automatic nature, especially when we're young. So anyway,
No, I don't agree that. So
I think again, it's like, it's all dependent on like who is listening to this information and making sure that they're filtering it correctly. And like, how they're receiving and interpreting that. Because like, to make the point that you made yesterday, that like some men could hear this and be like, okay, so my like automatic erections for any attractive woman I see is fine because it's my biology. And it's like, no, your body should not be responding like that all the time whenever you have any sort of inclination.
No, and that's assuming. So like they're saying like, oh, young men when they hit puberty automatically, like I don't know them. I don't know their stories. I don't know anything about them, but I would assume that most men our ages, because I'm in my 30s, you know, I don't look at like we're all around the same age. We're exposed to porn super early before we should have been and that's a like a psychological trauma that we experienced. And so therefore I would say that all of our anecdotal evidence of how puberty was experienced should be thrown out the window and just
as like, that's the way it just is.
Right. To be like, oh yeah, like I have stories from when I was young. Like, yeah, I do too. And like that my childhood was not what it should have been because of my experience with pornography. So like to say that like, that's just normal. And this is how guys experience it at that age. And then to think that like, and then we're wired that way as we get older as well. No, like there was a miswiring that happened because of our early exposure. And there was a lot of untangling that needed to happen, at least for me, in order to not experience life that way. And I don't experience life that way. It's not like I'm constantly, like they make it seem like you're constantly on edge to be aroused at any second. Like you could just be aroused and your wife's just like, what the heck? Like you do see the memes though. And like the reels of, but like when a husband sees, like, here's the shower upstairs. Like, yes, but like, and it's, I see, and I do it jokingly, and I love you, but like those kind
about what's coming out
no, I'm just saying like those kind of like memes are true, but like, I think there's a very big difference of again, a misunderstanding of like attraction versus like like deep sexual desire. Like there's a very big difference about all that. And I think because our wires were crossed when we were younger, because of our exposure to pornography, like we may not be able to differentiate that, and we just lump it all together.
Yeah. And if we're not taking the time to bring this to prayer, to bring this to like real consideration of our sexual experiences, then we're just going to keep like lumping it and just being like, yep, that's just the way that it is. And I think that if we don't take these kinds of things as opportunities to reevaluate how we think about sex and how we've internalized some of our experiences, and like do those things that I think do those things that happened to me a long time ago and I don't think matter anymore, do they actually still have an effect on my relationship and the way I think about sex and the way my body responds to sexual stimuli and things like that?
Yeah. I just want to do one more and end on Sam Guzman. So Sam Guzman is the founder of Catholic Gentleman, and I actually like what he says. I think he's very pastoral in this, and I think he's a trained therapist too.
I like this point too.
Maybe does he say it here?
Yeah. Well, I think one important point, and Devin kind of laid the groundwork for this, but then women often think that men are just beasts, like as long as he gets sex, like he doesn't care about emotions. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't have any like attraction to me. It's literally just, I'm just there and I could easily be exchanged for someone else. And that's actually not true. They did a survey of like 450 men of all different states of life. And basically the consensus was only 3% of men had that mindset. I don't care who it is. I just want sex, and 97% of men wanted emotional connection. But the way that men want emotional connection is different than the way women want emotional connection. Like for men, it's very much about being wanted. Like, I want to be wanted by you. And so often men are like, it's very much tied to your sense of self. Where like most men are not going to enjoy sex if the woman is just laying there like completely uninterested, zero response. Like no man's going to be excited by that. I mean, you'd have to be pretty kind of warped mentally to be excited by that. Like men want women to want them. And so they pursue and they like initiate and things like that. And for a man, it can be extremely deflating if a woman shows no interest. And of course, again, like this is not the way women think, right? So the woman's just thinking, it's not, of course I want you. I love you. I care about you. All of these things. I'm just really, really busy doing the dishes and the laundry and like changing diapers and things. And I'm just not there mentally. But for
I thought that was a really good point. That's actually one that you didn't hear yesterday.
No, I didn't.
No, but I thought it was really good because I think he illustrated really well the point that for men, they desire intimacy. How did I word it here? Men desire sex to feel connected. And then women usually desire to feel connected in order to have sex. Mm-hmm. And like, that's, I think we could say that is a bigger reason for the disconnect in most marriages over the like, men just desire sex more biologically.
Right.
Like, I think it's more of like the reason that both parties pursue sex.
Yes. Right. And I think too, that like, I hope that point sparks the most conversations for couples in this episode, is that the idea of like, how are we going about pursuing sex in our relationship, and like, how are we responding to those pursuits? So if our husband is like initiating sex at a poor time, is there a way to still respond and show that he is loved and wanted and good, and also communicate to him that just like the timing is just off. It has nothing to do with you, but it has to do with the timing. And is there ways for husbands to start to try to pick up on, now's not a good time, and I may not get the outcome that I'm hoping for if I initiate at this point? How can I help set the stage for a positive response? Which you kind of talked about before.
I kind of like within our marriage, because we struggled with this too. And I remember something like, and I think I verbalized it to you once, that like, I just want to feel desired.
Yeah.
So like you just saying, like, even if you were like, no, we can't for whatever reason, like, but I want to though, like, okay. And that was it. Like, I'm happy.
I just want to know you want to too.
That's it. High five.
You want to? I want to. Yeah.
Right. Like, and so like that was, I just remember, but like just on like what he was saying though, like feeling desired and wanted is a big part of it. And then on the flip side, like you expressing the idea of mental load and it taking 3 years for me to fully understand it. Realizing that like, okay, it wasn't just like you have to make the bed more, but like you can't, like you see mess and like you see things that need to be done. And as much as like I can just step over things, like you can't, and that's we are made differently, and that's great. We complement one another, but like I have to be aware of like, and you have a mental load, and you feel connected by my taking care of the things that you're thinking of and are burdened with. Yeah. And that feeling connected leads to like I desire intimacy with you.
Right.
So like that's not a bad thing.
And I think that like one of the points that can also be true, like biologically speaking, is that a man can physically be prepared for sex more quickly than a woman can.
Yes.
Right. So I think that one of the things that we've worked on in our marriage as well is that like that acknowledgement of that, and that there are sometimes times where I am feeling intimate and I'm feeling loved and taken cared of, and I desire closeness with you, but my body might not feel turned on at the moment. But that I can take those cues of feeling desire for intimacy and closeness to try to initiate at that time, and my body will catch up, right? So for some women who might feel low libido, but things are going well in your relationship, part of it might just be like you need to start getting involved in the act to physically feel ready. And and for men to start to understand that that's not necessarily a reflection on you, but it's like you've achieved the goal of wanting, of showing your wife that she's loved and she's your beloved and you desire intimacy too. So I think that like I worked on initiating more, recognizing that I don't have to be turned on in order to initiate. And I think that you've also, on the flip side,
recognize that being turned on does not mean that I have to initiate.
Right. Yes. And you can like see that.
So I just repressed everything. Everything is just packed down.
Shut up.
Down. Sorry.
Not true. Are we starting a conversation after we?
No, I killed it. Sorry. Killed all the desire.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm just kidding.
It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
Nope.
It's dead.
Nope. So I think a couple takeaways though.
There's actually no episode 100. It's all gone
It's
now.
over. It's over. This is all. No, I'm joking about the repression thing. I don't know. I think in long form content, you can't judge the thing until the episode's over. You can reflect and respond and react to it though. But so I think the couple things to take away though. One, if you are a man who's struggling with any feelings of lust, pornography, or like extreme desire for sex all the time in your marriage, I do want to reiterate that I think it's worth going to therapy therapy plus spiritual direction. Because you really, I think
the two are not the same.
Yes, they're not the same at all. And if you only do one and without the other, I have thoughts. But I just think it's worth doing doing that work to figure out spiritually, like where, like, are you allowing the sexual desires to stem from a place that aren't healthy, that aren't going to be, help you and your wife and your spouse grow in holiness? And then also therapy wise, like, are there things you were exposed to too early? Like, I think we underestimate how some of the things from our childhood could be affecting us. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just because we've come to just feel like this is our normal, and we don't know what we don't know. And we're just going to keep chugging along, and things seem okay until they don't. So, if you're somebody who's 17 times a day, every 7 minutes, like, that's not okay.
Yeah. And if we're still like acting from a place of woundedness, then we're also, if we don't initiate that process of healing, then we're wounding the future as well. Like, we're wounding our family because our marriage is not where it could or should be. And then therefore our children are going to be affected by that, and so on. So
what is a thing? I think Sister Miriam says like the wounds that aren't healed are transferred.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing is, you have these conversations with your spouse. I think the biggest takeaway is the last thing that Sam said is that it's not the biology. I think the biology should lead to like further pursuits of healing, if that's where you're at. But the having a shared vision of like, this is how we need to be talking about sex and expressing to your spouse when you desire, why you desire, really doing that inner work, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
I think that can make a big difference into the conversations you have about sexual intimacy, so that you don't feel like it's just your husband that wants to have sex all the time, but like there's more to this.
Yeah. I guess I hope you just realize like that none of these things are places where you can settle. Like, don't settle for the fact that this is how often I think. Don't settle for the fact that you always feel rejected by your wife. Wives, like, don't settle for the fact that like, this is just the way my husband is made. Don't settle for the idea that, he's never going to be able to like step up and meet my needs, but I have to meet his. Like, there's like, don't settle, like take these behaviors as indicators and opportunities to work on things, to start conversations, because it might just be things that like you didn't know what you didn't know. And now hopefully something has sparked and maybe some healing can begin, or just better communication,
Or both.
all of the above.
And the next time we see you, it'll be on episode 100.
Join us. Let us know if you want to join us. Find us on Instagram, send us an email. Subscribe to our email list on tobecomefamily.com. We'll send out when we're going to record and how to get to it. And we would love to actually see you at the next episode.